Good evening and welcome to this Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 24th of January. My name is Councillor Helm and I'm Chairman of this committee. Members, we are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting you are giving your consent to being recorded. During each item, please put your hand up and indicate you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Please note that the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of the microphone. Therefore, can I please ask you, when invited to speak, you remember to turn on your microphone and turn it off when you've finished. Please reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. Minutes of the last meeting on pages 5 to 8. Apologies for absence, sorry, I'm jumping the gun. Any apologies for absence?
Chairman, apologies.
Chairman,
sorry.
Evening. Apologies received from Councillors Brian Beale, Bell and Hurd. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that. I'll go to where I was going to go. Minutes of the last meeting, pages 5 to 8. Are you all agree with that? Can I propose her in a seconder, please? And Beale.
Seconded.
Carly May, sorry.
That's okay.
All in favour? I can't because I wasn't there. Right, disclosures of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable peculiar interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraph 9 and appendix B of the Code of Conduct for Members. Members are also reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the need arise through the meeting. Public participation. Have we got any, Stuart? No public participation. Come on. Right, we move on now to the review of a scrutiny work plan item, number 6, planning decision making, pages 9 to 22. To consider the report of the Overview and Scrutiny Working Group, copy enclosed. Get to the page, was it?
Yeah, if you go to page 9. If you go to page 9. Page 9.
Sorry, members, I'm a bit slow. I'm not used to working with computers like this. Got to 10.
There you go, one more.
Got to page 9.
There you go.
There we are. To present the committee working group further reports together with recommendation course of action for the committee to consider or scrutinise in further detail should it be considered. That the committee considers the interim response and recommendations of the working group for report back to council or reference to another committee as appropriate, or defining the scope for actually scrutineering and engaging the working group if any further work is felt to be required. Summary of the issues. This scrutineering work plan item derives from a motion by Councillor Fluker, which was referred to council by this committee. An associated reference from council in July 2022 on planning decision makings was added to the work plan. At the last meeting of the committee in October, an outline response from the Overview and Scrutiny Working Group was received, and the committee accepted the working group's initial findings, conclusions, and asked for this to be worked up in greater detail by the working group for interim consideration by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in December 2022. It was felt that the committee would then be in a better position to assess how near it was to being able to conclude making a response and any recommendation either to council or to the relevant committees, with the aim of a final report to the meeting of the committee in February or March 2023. Members of the committee were updated as to the ongoing deliberations of the working group with a view to a meeting being held in January 2023 to tie in with target dates set by committee for the response to another working plan. Stuart, do you want to carry on presenting the report then?
Well, Chairman, you've made a good start there.
Sorry.
I'm about to say, Feel free to carry on. Yes, Chairman. As the report initially states there, this is the second time this matter has been reported back to this committee, this time in more detail than previously, to pick up the points raised by members of the committee on the last occasion. And in 3.3 of the covering report, the bullet points there summarise the main conclusions of the working group to date on some initiatives, things, way forward, outcomes that could be recommended back to council or the relevant committee to pick up and run with. I think it's worth just emphasising that the last of those bullet points, which says a new protocol on planning decision making, is referred to in the appendix report as almost a logical conclusion of all these thoughts, because at the moment the council, within its constitution and associated documentation, has got a variety of documents and reference points that have a bearing on decision making, in particular planning decision making. And the logical conclusion would be, with anything else arising from this examination now, to try and pull those together into a single planning decision making protocol document that could be adopted afresh by the council for inclusion in the constitution. It would give it added focus and added weight. So I just make that point in passing, but subject to that, I think it's for the committee now to sort of wend its way through the various conclusions and see how it feels, whether there is enough there or whether it needs to send anything back to the working group to do more. That's the essence of the recommendation, Chairman.
Members, Carly May, Councillor May.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's quite interesting, isn't it? Protocols are all very well. Policies are all very good, but only if you follow them. And clearly, having looked at the papers, we didn't follow our own protocols. So why are we writing more? To then not follow them either? Why was some of these protocols not flagged up to members by legal, planning, or governance? So we have failures elsewhere, not just at the front line, which we are. And I think that also needs looking at. It's all very well having, lots of people and lots of bits of paper and lots of policies and lots of documents, but they're only as good as those which we follow.
Stuart, would you like to comment on that?
Just one, Chairman. I think the essence of what's coming out of this exercise and what I've just mentioned, it would be a strengthening of whatever you had there before, which was perhaps more guidance wherever it was held, but taking the idea of this constitutional break to review decisions or potential decisions following a move to overturn an officer's recommendation, that would become more hardened in the form of a rule. It would be in the constitution. It would be something more set, hard and fast for a committee to follow in that circumstance. So I'm suggesting to the committee this would be a significant strengthening and a hardening of your existing guidance into more firmer rules and procedures in certain circumstances.
Councillor Mays.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to come back. That sounds great. Can we not have just words? Can we have some diagrams so that it's easy to follow? Otherwise, you're spending lots of time looking at lots of words that sometimes don't make sense because they're sometimes in the wrong order, not necessarily using the right verbs in the right places. And I'm fed up with it. I'm just fed up with it. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just can't help feeling that this would be a lot easier to impose if we had a single planning committee, frankly. But we obviously are where we are. I've looked at the report very well, and there's obviously a lot of work gone into it. Can perhaps the officer to come back and just put a little bit more flesh on the bones of exactly how this constitutional intervention or break would actually operate?
Councillor Spenceley.
So I'm not clear there. I just would ask you, I wasn't clear whether Councillor May, as part of the working group, whether you were referring to this report or whether you're referring to planning reports, because what this actually addresses is a number of different issues, and one of the things in there we do look at is planning reports and how they're presented and how they could be presented in a clearer fashion. The other thing that I would say with regard to the work on the constitutional break is that there are several different options within that. So obviously that would be for members to debate what they felt appropriate or not appropriate, but it was one of the items that we looked at in considering what the possible this isn't trying to say that there's any particular way forward. What we're looking at is what all the possible options are to change things for a better way to move forward. And I do agree that there are lots of other things that may not be followed and are not followed from time to time. But I still think that a single protocol for planning, whatever that contains, would be a good way forward in terms of perhaps trying to address some of the issues that we were looking at before. Obviously, it's not going to address them all, because there are things in there that in that item that I've already taken issue with within this committee, such as the 5-year housing land supply and whether or not it's completely accurate. So those things are already being looked at. But what we were looking at here was more looking at planning policy and protocol going forward. So just to clarify on that, thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Morley.
Yes, thank you. When you say things as regards planning and making it a little bit clearer, is that because things are going to appeal a bit more as well, do you think, or are you trying to define the rules of granting or not granting permission? Will that sort of, is it because, we're going against the officers all the time? Is that what's encouraged it, would you say?
You go first and I'll come back.
I think the answer is we were asked to look at a specific case in point, which was a referral to the committee. And so obviously what we've drawn upon is not absolutely everything else and not looked at other figure and datas, but looking at this particular case and some things that might have made that situation different. I think that's very complex, but it was an opportunity to look at our planning, the way our planning works, our decision-making process works overall. And that was what we were really trying to drill down in, and to provide a report for the committee to consider on whether or not there are recommendations that come out of this that we would want to make or not want to make to full council. Okay.
And the other trouble we have is planning officers come from all over the country. They don't live in this area, so they're making decisions on something they don't see, only other than Google and
That's what I was getting at.
and photographs that.
I don't really want that taken away.
No.
In that, I don't think gut feeling.
No.
Sorry. Thank you.
No, but what I'm trying to say is that officers rely on their juniors to go out and take pictures of the site, and they're remotely working from, say, Cornwall or Devon.
Yeah. But when you've lived in somewhere for 60 years, you kind of know...
You know everything.
Sorry,
that's where it comes
63
back to
years.
members' decisions again. Paula.
Never moved. Thank you.
I think what we're looking at here is, and I understand the perception that there are problems with other parts of the system that haven't worked. But what we're looking at here, we can only really look at one thing at a time, in a sense. And what we're trying to look at here is a way for us to move forward to avoid some potential footfall. I'll say that again.
Yeah.
To avoid some potential problems in the way that we make planning decisions. That's not to say that we're saying here that members are always at fault and officers aren't, or anything. It's not really looking at that. And actually, when you read the report through, it does look at, for example, when we go to appeal, whether or not an officer who disagrees with the decision that members have made, whether or not it should be that officer or a different person who's representing the case at the appeal. So I think it broaches quite a lot of things, but the idea is it's drawing together, looking at what we do and in one protocol. So that, you know, that's how we address this particular issue. And that's what we've come back with. Thank you.
Councillor Mays and then Councillor Morley.
My only comment is again, nobody actually highlighted this. It's very clear in the motion that was put that this protocol exists, and yet we ignored it. And to me, it's, you can write whatever you like, unless they're flagged up to members, and sometimes that's continually, and that is the job that we require our officers to do for us, because we are not experts.
No.
And we cannot know everything about everything.
Councillor Morgan next. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, thank you. Just really coming back on Councillor Spencer's point with regard to, I read with interest the question of officers attending at appeals in that way. And I also note that there was a suggestion that obviously members should be considered for attending these appeals as well. I mean, I'm obviously quite new to this. Are we saying that members have not been doing that up till now?
No.
Which seems to be surprising.
No, some haven't. No.
Well, obviously.
And when some wanted to go to the appeal, they were refused by the officers.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I find that extraordinary.
Yeah. You threw it.
Just on that point, Chairman, I mean, the report brings forward the existing planning appeals protocol, which has been in existence for several years now. I think it probably goes back to 2012, 2013. In the context of what you're considering here, it would be a good idea to review and refresh that protocol, which will be built into this new planning decision making, because it's all part of the, not the actual decision making, but the fallout of the decision making. It's all relevant.
Councillor Stamp, you wanted to speak?
I have. Thank you, Chairman.
I gave her permission to speak, members.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd actually like to say that we, throughout this report, it seems to just keep going towards a single planning committee. We have to acknowledge that that motion failed and we are where we are. And the way I've read this is that it's diluting or trying to dilute what we're democratically elected to do. You're on about delegation of final decision to director in consultation, which is paragraph 13, to a chairperson and legal officer. It concerns me that this report, and I'm going to say something and admit it, Chairman, that I didn't even know about the, Councillor Mays is right, the planning and application appeal protocol. Nobody sent it to me, and if you expect members to read a 200 or 300 page constitution and do their committees and do a 400 page document, which we've got for SNR, and read this agenda that came out late because it wasn't on the website when members wanted to see it, I think you're actually asking a lot of members, Chairman, and I think we do need guidance from officers, and I think it needs to be all-rounded guidance. Chairman, we've had planning training. Why wasn't we given that area of planning training? Why didn't we know? You know, and I actually don't understand what this is actually all about, and I don't see necessary at this stage what recommendations you as chairman or this committee can make that is fair and balanced. I mean, there's inaccuracies in here. It does say, when you're talking about appeals, that 2.9 years land supply, which is constantly being quoted on appeals at the moment, and we all seen the recent appeals, was an inaccurate figure. But all planning inspectors are still quoting it when we were told that figure was incorrect. And what's bothering me is that the mistakes are being continually made. And one question is why? Why is that being allowed to continue to be made, Chairman? So thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm not enamoured with this, and I do apologise if I'm being a negative ninny, but I actually that's the way I see it. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Right, I've asked Stuart to see if we can make papers available in the members' room for you to go and look through the protocols and that. Can that be done?
Yeah, it's been so.
The other one.
Chairman, it's been, the existing planning appeals protocol is in the Constitution. It's an annex to the guidance on dealing with and conduct of planning matters.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I actually echo what Councillor Stamp's saying. I've been a member since 2019. You've been a member since 2021? 2022.
Yep.
I didn't know about it. I think Councillor Stamp has been a member for a lot longer than I have. I didn't know about this. I'm sorry, but why are these important pieces of information? It doesn't take much for an officer to say to a member, look at this.
Reference whatever it
Reference it. And we are constantly having the wool pulled over our eyes. And again, like Councillor Stamp, I am fed up with it.
Yeah.
And this has got to stop.
Well, I've been a member for 12 years and I don't know anything about this. Never seen it. Do you want?
I want to speak.
Yeah, Paula.
So I'm just going to say, one of the things in this report that we go over is member training, which I think is important. And I, as a new member, because I've only been here 10 months? Not even that. I certainly would like to have different training, not only more training, but quite different training is what we had, because I don't believe that it's delivered in a way that most people can absorb, and certainly it wouldn't pass any sort of Ofsted inspection, that's for sure. So we do need to re-examine training. I disagree slightly with Councillor Stamping that this isn't. I do agree that there are parts where this would take away decision making from us, but there are also other things in this. It's not just about that, and it's about which parts of this we would want, such as whether we're talking about new reports, member training, whether we're looking at whether or not. I don't particularly support, I don't support a delegation option, but a deferment option. There could be circumstances where deferment for further advice within this protocol, I would agree with. So that's why that's what we've put forward. If my thoughts on this are that perhaps it should be something, this working group here has only 4 people, and it would be really perhaps useful, in my opinion, and it's something that I might put forward at a future date as a request for scrutiny, is scrutiny of how we do scrutiny, because I do think that it needs to be given more importance and perhaps be a wider thing. But where we go from here is something I'm going to talk to Stuart about now. I mean, if members are minded that they want to kind of put this to one side altogether, fair enough. But is there anything in here that you think is positive that should go forward as part of a new protocol? And if you don't feel that there should be a new single protocol, I think maybe suggestions as to what we could recommend and put forward would be helpful. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, it's just really a sort of question. I've always operated on the principle of it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this seems to operate on the basis that the planning system as it currently operates is completely broken. I'm not entirely sure that's true. Certainly not from my point of view. I mean, obviously there are issues that can be done with it. However, one aspect of this that I do think is important is the business on officer reports. I have to say, the standard of reports that come to it is confusing. It's not set out logically, in my view. That could have considerable improvement. So if there's one part of this that I would fully endorse, it's that. Thank you.
And probably that's why you need area committees, so the members can have their input at that stage. Because without that, you'll have 9 people deciding, and it's not part of this discussion. So we've got to go back and work this over then, Stuart, it seems.
Only in the sense that, or only in the areas where the committee feels it needs something definite to concentrate on certain things as opposed to others. Let's not get too hung up on the idea of a separate protocol. That was just a conclusion that came out, a logical conclusion, as I said, that came out of doing the work to date, in the knowledge that we've got various bits of guidance and protocols scattered around the Constitution, and that's the very nature of the Council's Constitution, how it's grown up over the years. if you were to start again, it would perhaps from scratch, it would be a lot more codified, a little bit more logical. But this is one step towards getting it more logical rather than have bits and pieces scattered all over the place. It will draw it all together in one place. Plus the fact that this comes to the committee on the back of these motions to offer some sort of idea or reassurance back to council that things can be done, some steps can be taken to help mitigate or reduce the prospects of similar decisions occurring again. And the added strength that a constitutional break, in whatever form it might end up in, gives added strength to the actual planning decision-making part, more strength than you've got now.
With that in mind, if we look at 3.3 on page 9, I guess we could take what pieces we like out of the bullet points there and put that forward in a proposal as a recommendation to council. So I'm just wondering, I personally, well, I don't know what everybody else thinks, but my thoughts are that certainly at this stage, the constitutional intervention seems to be something that needs more thought and perhaps is better after the elections. That's all I'm going to say, because we'll have new members here in May. The planning appeals protocol refresh with strengthening of member involvement, I think maybe that is important to go forward, because I think that appertains precisely to the question, that the motion that we were dealing with. So I think that's important. And member training seems to be something that I'm feeling in the room is everybody's agreeing with. Officer reports and to perhaps are people opposed to having a new protocol at this stage and would rather leave that for something that we look at later?
I don't think there's any need for it.
Okay, well, that's fine. So then, can I propose that we adopt the bullet points that we spoke of there? The planning appeals protocol refresh with strengthening of member involvement, member training, including the what we've got in that paragraph there, and officer reports, review of the format and introduction of technical presentations. So can I suggest that we recommend that to full council, put that forward as a proposal? Has anybody got any thoughts on that?
Councillor Stout.
Do you mind if I just, thank you, Chairman. That member training, if you read the full sentence, you need to be careful of what you're going to recommend, because it says improved opportunities.
Oh, yes.
You can't just willy-nilly put forward what it is, because if you look at the context of it, thank you for allowing me to say that, Chairman. And can I say one more thing before the members agree? I know I can't vote, but if you look at page 15, number 11, This really bothers me, and this bothers me for a specific reason. It says an advice paper produced by Cornerstone Barristers in July 2020 looked in detail at best practice for ensuring and planning committees are advised of the potential risks on appeal and cost of award. In a Court of Appeal case involving it's on about the costs. Now, we know, Chairman, that at a recent District Planning Committee hearing that I wasn't allowed to speak on because I was in Warwick, members were distinctly advised about how they should or shouldn't vote because of the costs that was going to be to this council. Now, it's really important that when you're going to state a case, or when it goes to the High Court or whoever, that we need to be accurate in what we're reporting. And it bothers me that it now says, while it is appropriate for officers to advise members of the potential cost and reputational implications of refusing permission, this should not be confused with or taken into account as material considerations in planning analysis or in the exercise of planning judgment. Now, I think we really need to be careful how our officers are saying that when it comes to our district and our area planning committees. Thank you for allowing me to actually raise that, because that bothers me, and it's highlighted in orange. Thank you.
Was there Councillor Maisie? Do you want to say something?
No, thank you. I was just agreeing with what Councillor Stamp was saying.
Anybody
Thank you,
else?
Mr. Chairman.
Councillor
on that member training, I think it ought to just say member training, improved opportunities for bespoke and specialised training.
Yeah.
What do you need all that other tush for?
No, you don't. You don't.
You don't. That was a technical term, that was. So basically just stop after training,
For bespoke and specialised training.
after the decision at last full
Got all
council.
that?
Yeah.
Are members happy with that, to move back to the working group and do that?
Yeah, I was going to second that, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Who proposed it?
Me.
Me. Seconded it. Done. All in favour? Yeah, okay.
So, Chairman, just to clarify, you're asking for these matters these two matters to go back to the working group. Three matters, sorry, to go back to the working group for more.
No, it's for proposal to.
You can refer these.
To full council.
So the mechanics of it will be a separate report to council arising from this, which
Yes.
will obviously concentrate on the things that members have emphasised.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Right, we'll move on to item 7. It's gone again. I've had to use my iPad because the computer has stopped. The mouse has got lost. I think it got caught in a trap somewhere. Potential scrutiny work plan, planning enforcement. Do you want to lead that, or does Anne want to lead it, or?
Well, just to give it a little bit of context, Chairman, this has been before the committee before, mainly arising from 2 individual member requests for scrutiny around specific elements of the enforcement process, but nevertheless carrying with it concerns about what's become known as the historical backlog of cases which form part of the enforcement programme. And at the last meeting of the committee, it was requested that further information on performance be sought, together with information around where the enforcement programme has come from, where it's going to in the context of the enforcement policy. And it's been before the working group, and via that route, this is the report back to this committee with information, and you have officer support for the information contained there, Chairman. I've called it a potential scrutiny work plan item because previously it was a watching brief item, and therefore members, according to the recommendation, may be reassured with what they're being told now, or may request further detail or actual scrutiny of processes, Chairman.
Members?
Yes, sorry. Yes, I note that there is one of the matters I recall from the last meeting was the dissatisfaction we all felt with the way that the enforcement matters were published, and trying to make head or tail of that great screed of information. Am I right in saying, or did I read correctly, that in future that is going to be revised, and that we're going to have that split down into wards? A list for each particular ward will be produced.
Chairman, I think that assurance was given to the working group at the time that officers were already working on breaking that overall list down. Yes, Chairman.
Just further, I should point out that there is one of the parishes in my particular ward has now raised a sort of second level complaint with regards to enforcement or lack of enforcement in a matter within its purview. And I just sort of really want to say that this is a very important issue. I mean, I know that the officers involved are working very hard, but certainly the perception outside, certainly in my ward, is that enforcement is not working in Malden District Council.
Councillor Mays, and then I'll let you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bit light on detail, bit light on stats. 22, what happened to 19, 20, 21, perhaps something even before that? Where did the big numbers come from initially? That's just a question. There are no timings on the report at all with regard to, feed in an enforcement matter. How long is it before it gets to the next stage? How long are officers going to be waiting and having it sitting in their in tray? None of that in there. How are they going to actually deal with something when it's gone through all of the processes, and the application, or the applicant rather, has been refused planning permission, and the only option is a stop notice, and yet we won't issue stop notices. Why? Because there might be another planning application coming forward. Yeah, and that could sit in the system again for 2 years, 3 years, and another appeal. And so it goes on. Meanwhile, making residents' life an absolute misery. Again, can't go on. We need to be sending a strong message to everybody. That's everybody from us as individuals, right the way through to developers, Joe Bloggs on the street who thinks that he can put up an extension without planning permission because he thinks he's got permitted development rights, which we do have. We are not sending out the right message. We are just ignoring it. There is no timings on any of this. There is always the excuse, we can't do that, or it could cost us a lot of money. Well, it'll cost us a lot of money. We'll have to dip into our reserves. Oh dear. We need to be doing this. I totally, 110% support all the work that our enforcement officers do. And we need to give them the power to do their job. And if we need a stop notice, if we need a PCN, if we need whatever, then that's what we should be doing and not letting these things drag on. And my view is that a lot of these numbers, these big numbers, we're still sitting at 574 across the district, is because they're sitting too long in an in tray. That must be so demoralising for those guys. And then they get into trouble when they do try and do things. We've got to be much more proactive.
I agree with you there.
Thank you.
We have, let me just say, we have had these lists go on for a long time. We've got COVID, which is meant to have stopped some of the work. We used to have it come to area planning committees, the enforcement, to look at, to see what should be done, but that hasn't come lately. The last one I did was in here for South East when I was chairman of South East. And that's where we can sort some of this out, because we've got the local...
Basin watching.
Just so you're aware, members, Councillor Spencer is vice chairman of the working group. That's why she does most of the speaking, because she's well aware of the...
No, that's
You didn't even cross that line, Chairman, you're doing a good job.
All work together, we all work together. I just want to make them aware that they might think
They might think I've got too much to say. Otherwise.
No, you're all right.
No, you carry on.
Glad someone has something to say, that's fine.
I think we're back.
Are we back?
We go back to Councillor Beale if we are.
Hello?
Yes, we're all back. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Beale again, please. Can you repeat what you were saying before you cough?
If I can remember, yeah. Basically, the reason we've got as high as it is, as Councillor Helm will agree, we never have ever had enough staff to actually really give it a good crack at the enforcement. I mean, I've known some items there going for 5-7 years, and they said, oh, well, we haven't got the staff to do it.
And the rest?
And since the COVID thing, you haven't got the staff going out on site to physically know what they're making I nearly swore then. To say, all right, heaven, yeah, that cancels it out. Right, basically, the staff are not going out on site, so how can they make a judgment on something they've never seen? They've never asked the ward members if there's an issue.
Yeah.
But that's the main problem is they haven't got enough staff in that department to actually do the job.
Right, okay, we've got Anne Shortland who's going to say we have in a minute, I think.
And as I mentioned, item 6 on this Appendix A, officers acknowledge the value of individual member involvement on cases, particularly to give a local perspective.
Okay.
And I totally agree with Councillor Mays. We need it itemised into wards. Reason being, when you get the page... page 200 and you've still got another 184 pages to go.
She's waiting
It
there.
wears a bit thin.
Right, okay, Anne.
Just to say, well, a few things actually. Will Coleman, the team leader of enforcement, has split the big list that goes out to members into areas. You know, the 3 areas.
Yes.
The 3 area committees. So he has done that. So next time it goes out, it should go out in just the 3 portions. So you just go into your area and that make the list smaller. I'm not sure if we can do it in wards. I'm not sure if the IT allows us to do that. I could speak to Will about it. The other thing is, I have to say I do agree with Councillor Mays. It's really difficult because there hasn't been enough staff, and when even if you have a short period where there's no one there, the backlog quickly builds up. And you know, these have been quite long periods where there's nobody there. And I'm not going to say there's enough staff now because we don't really know that, because we can only judge that properly when we get rid of that backlog. But one of the things I was thinking that the working group could look at is we've got a protocol, but we don't actually know if it works with the processes that we have in place and are going to put in place to be more effective. And it'd be quite a good idea for members to have a look at that and match it up and see if it is working. And the idea of having a process is you really should process map your processes so that you know that when a case comes in, you can see it on a diagram, which certain people in the room think is really good.
Someone's jumping up and down here about your diagrams.
What is the pathway of that enforcement case? And you can do that really easily with enforcement cases. And does that pathway then line up with your enforcement protocol? And that's when you can start putting, well, in 5 days we'll do this, or in 10 days we're going to do this. But until you do that exercise, it's almost impossible to say how long things are going to take, because you can't see the pathway of where your cases are going to go and how you're going to deal with them. And the other thing might be a good idea for the working group to have a look at is how do, I'm not saying members have to be involved in all decision making, because you'd be there forever. You would never do anything else except look at enforcement cases. But when cases get to the point of taking, the possibility of taking action, how do members then become involved in that decision making and what is appropriate? Because we don't really have anything at the moment, and it might be a good item for discussion and debate and agreement so that we can all sign up to that. And the other thing I think would be really good is how do we prioritise which cases we do first? Who is the top priority? What is the top priority? And how do we work that out? Because at the moment, from my observations of of doing enforcement and helping out, there isn't a lot of that. And what happens is he who shouts the loudest gets their case done first, and all the other work doesn't then get done. So we need a clear process of how we are going to deal initially with cases, who gets done first. And it might be a really good idea if members get involved in that. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah. And in the past, area committees have met to discuss their enforcement cases. I chaired the last one for South East in this chamber, and we haven't had one for 4 years or something like that. They find it extremely useful.
I think it would be really useful, but at the moment with the backlog, there's hundreds of them, you know, and you're going to be there for hours and hours and hours. And I think maybe we could devise a system for the future for cases when we get rid of all that horrible backlog.
Stuart wanted to come in, I think.
Just to clarify on the issue of area committees getting involved in that, I think we've moved past the point of area committees dealing with them in a formal sense, because all of enforcement powers are delegated, save for injunctions and extreme circumstances like that. So area committees don't ordinarily have any decision-making powers in relation to enforcement, but what was offered was the ability for informal meetings, gatherings of members on an area basis, which officers would then supply information to if that helped the process. But in the context of what's being suggested now for the working group to look at in more detail, in particular member involvement, that can be looked at.
Paula, then Councillor Morgan, then Councillor Stamp.
Okay, so what I'm going to say is that, and this is part of one of my issues really with how we're doing scrutiny at the moment. But when you look at this report, if I could just refer members and officers to page 26, and if we go to point 9, we start talking about arboricultural and conservation matters are reviewed by subject matter experts from the respective fields, who will identify and raise to the enforcement team should remedial actions be required to resolve any issues. Well, I did speak about this on the pre-agenda meeting, and the truth is this doesn't actually happen in reality. So when we get a report like this to committee, what is really important for scrutiny is that we have a starting point where we look at where we actually are. And I don't think this does say, and I go back to what Councillor May said about the figures, but particularly that really stood out to me because, for example, you know, I know when I was on actually in public session at a planning committee meeting, when I asked Mr. Lee how we go about enforcing environmental conditions, and other members in the room might remember it, he actually said to me, we don't. So to be told that in one context, and I do know, for example, in my own ward, where we've got, where trees fail, where there was a condition that they had to survive for 5 years, etc., and we've had cases like that outstanding since 2019 on the North Heybridge Garden suburb, and I'm looking at the list, no one's ever visited. So I think when we come to a report like this, because we can't help anybody move forward, we can't make sensible recommendations about staff levels or how we tackle this, what protocols we have, if we're not starting from a really honest baseline. And scrutiny is one place where that really should be happening. So I'm not trying to be overly critical, because it's great that we've got the report, but what we really need is a picture. I think, I'm all for it being referred back to the working group and coming back to committee again for more scrutiny. But I think we need a really clear picture of where we're at and what needs to, then we can look at ways forward and what needs to happen next. Because I just don't feel that we've got a really clear picture. And my fear is we'll kind of look at this and it'll all just go round and round and round, where if we really want to change things, I think we've got to get down to that baseline of what's actually happening now and what we can do as members to try to help make things better going forward. It's just
Councillor Morgan.
Yes, thank you. Can I just pick up on Mr. Jennings's sort of suggested and plan for area committees and enforcement officers to meet perhaps on an informal basis necessarily. I fully take the point that the area committees don't have any powers, but we know, I assure you, our inboxes are full with sort of complaints from residents as to what's going on, and we're able to help prioritise what are the key enforcement issues in our particular areas. And then, in fact, moving on to that, there is, as I say, in a particular parish a concern, and it concerns a situation where the breach is because a property is being occupied either over the weekend or indeed occupied during the night. And of course, for some reason, enforcement officers seem unable, well, I don't know whether to actually attend at a weekend or indeed after hours. So I just wonder if there could be some way of changing that or that policy for them, so that that sort of relatively simple enforcement action could be taken.
We'll look into that. Councillor Beale and then Councillor Stamp.
Can I ask the officer how many people are in enforcement?
And how many people are in enforcement?
At the moment, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's four officers.
I got it right.
Yeah, there's 4 officers. There's a 20 hours for admin, and I'm coaching and supporting and helping with the processes and signing off cases and trying to get the closed cases gone and off the list. But I think two of them are contractors. They're not full-time.
That's right, yeah.
Staff, but yeah, they're contractors. Yeah. But just coming back to the conservation and tree officers, enforcement officers do consult them on a regular basis, because I've come across it loads in the files as I'm closing cases up and reading cases. So they do consult them on a regular basis. No, we don't check every condition on a planning application. There's just not the resources to do that. I mean, I would be honest about that. We can't do it, but it could be something you could talk about in the working group of how you're going to do it. It does have to be funded though if you employ an officer. At the last council, we did have a conditions compliance officer, and that's all I did. I just checked all the conditions. But the funding from conditions checking, you know, when you pay to have a condition discharge, that was transferred from development management into enforcement, so that it did partly fund it. But it's something that you could consider and look at. No point in putting conditions on if you're not going to enforce them, you know, at the end of the day.
And our tree officer, he works remotely, doesn't he?
I didn't think we had one.
He's a consultant.
Consultant.
I think it does. I'm going to go back to that. You need a clear priority of how you deal with cases, which cases are the most important. If you set that down in a clear protocol, then things like, and it will come out as top, because it always does, listed buildings and trees, that you should be leaving the office when you get a complaint or getting out of your house and going and having a look almost straight away, because they are top priority visits. If you don't catch them, it's really difficult to enforce. And, you know, these old cases on trees and things, like, we probably won't be able to do anything about them, you know.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Stamp.
I'm still breathing here.
Oh yeah. Carry on. Sorry. Sorry, Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, basically, so you got four members of staff, 2 are permanent, 2 are not, as in part-time. How many officers have we got in the planning department?
I don't know, I can't answer that question.
Oh, well, that's 5 points you lost.
Is there any
Right, the reason I'm asking is because I think the corporate leadership team need to change the policies around planning so that not only do they do the planning applications, and there can't be that many, that if they've got any time or time is allocated to looking at the enforcements in their prospective areas. I mean, do planning deal with specific areas or do they deal anywhere?
We're going to get an answer here. Richard Holmes, please.
Evening, members. I will give you the detail around the numbers of staff completely in planning. I haven't got to hand this evening, but I'll make sure that the committees provide that information. I think back on the point about will officers assist the enforcement, well, yes, they will, but I think you've also got to look at the backdrop, because we've had a severe shortage of staff in development management too, and heavily reliant on contractors. So there really is little or no capacity in the teams as they stand at the moment to actually do that kind of cross-team working, and obviously we're grateful to Anne and Matt Winslow for actually assisting us from the other side of the sort of team in terms of the policy and strategy side. But of course, members also remember now we're looking to reformat our teams into one larger team, which will actually strengthen that cross-team working and actually make sure we do try to build the resilience. But the honest answer right up to now and over the last 2 years is we've struggled tremendously with resources, and we've had shortages everywhere in the team, and that has had an impact in supporting activities such as enforcement.
I honestly think that members ought to be speaking to the enforcement team a lot more, even if it's on like area committees, because then you're going to get the local knowledge coming through, and then also hopefully we can, as you said, change the procedures so that we give Anne and the rest of her colleagues a cunning plan to say, right, if it's this gets done first. this gets done next, because I think they're probably they're probably overwhelmed by literally the amount of items that are there, and they've not got any sort of list of prioritisations, as in what's more important than the others. So I think we need to help the officers more decide on which way we need to go. But I definitely think officers and members need to be getting together on an area basis to basically give you the local knowledge. And I really would like to see the officers. I mean, is it feasible for members to go out to have a look at some enforcement things rather than the officers go out? If we know what we're being told to do. I mean, some of us are not working at the minute, but I don't know if there's a legal thingy there.
I think Anne's coming back on that, probably.
Yeah.
Anne?
It would be great if you could all go out on site visits for us. We could bash through all site visits, but I'd be so worried about you all, because at the end of the day, some of the people that we see are really unpleasant, and it just wouldn't be safe, I don't think, to be honest. I have to say that the policy team, they're out on doing other site visits for employment, looking at all the employment sites. So they've done a few site visits for us when they drive by in enforcement. It's about kind of using the facilities within the council. So if people are out and they can have a quick look, then yes, that's great. And if members if they know there's something in their area and they drive past and they think, oh yeah, well that's okay now, or they're continuing with that, just by dropping us a line in the enforcement inbox, that's all good intelligence. But I'd be really nervous, I'd be really worried about you if you started going out on site visits and talking to people. I think I'd be worried.
Thank you for that, Anne. Councillor Stamp.
Can I? Sorry.
Let Councillor Stamp have a go. She's been waiting a long. All right. Anne.
Why am I still red?
Because you're going to talk.
All right. Okay. Right, so yeah, I totally agree with what Anne's saying. I mean, I do it when I go out in my car. I don't just go out for one thing. I'm multi-skill. So like the officer was saying, if they're in an area looking at a planning application and they just happen to have their enforcement list with them and they're going past the door, that would be a good way of utilising the time. So yeah, that is definitely a good idea. And I can't think what else I was going to say now. There's fossilisation creeping in.
Councillor Stamp, finally.
Thank you, Chairman. You'll be pleased to know that Malden District Council do have a planning enforcement policy, and it was published in December 2020, so we aren't working illegally. We do have policies and we do have processes, so I want to reassure members and members of the public that we are working legally. And also, Chairman, I don't know if Mr Holmes can remember or Miss Hughes can remember, I'm sure that, was it last year or the year before, when we agreed to have an additional enforcement officer, a new, what I call a tick list, was given to that committee to agree before that officer was actually going to be put in post. I could be thinking I'm dreaming it, but I'm sure it actually came. So there is like a scoring thing on whether you think that's important, you get 5, 4, 3 or whatever it is. I'm sure something like that came to this council at some stage. So if Mr Holmes can have clarity on that. And can I just confirm how many full-time we've got, and if Ms Shortland is a contractor or a full-time employee? So how many full-timers do we have in enforcement? How many contractors do we have? Thank you.
Anne?
I think he's fine, but he knows the one that was empty.
I don't know if they all work full-time. I think there's 4 officers, 2 contractors, 2 by the council. I'm not a contractor anymore. I was when I first came to the council, but I actually work for council now. The admin person in enforcement only works 20 hours. I do know that. The priority list, the tick list, isn't very good and could be improved vastly. And that's something that if you do decide you want to have an enforcement working group, it would be a really good idea for the group to have a look at that. I having a tick list isn't that good. There are better ways of doing it, and it's something that we could talk about. And the enforcement protocol, yes, there is an enforcement protocol, but I'm very keen for you to set your map of the processes of how you're going to take your case forward in its life, and then you map your protocol around that map of processes. And I don't think that's been done, so it could be improved.
Paula.
So I was just going to say, because I do understand, Anne, why you might have misunderstood what I said before with regard to the arboricultural and conservation matters. Yes, you're right. At 8 on page 26, you do talk about not having a compliance officer. But what I was actually talking about, and some of that is historic. I understand what you're saying. They might not be enforceable now, but they were where residents and others have actually reported breaches of environmental conditions on, for example, the North Heybridge Garden suburb, where trees died as soon as they were put in, and actually some of the screening wasn't even ever planted. And that, from looking at that list, some of those haven't been visited, unless the information on the list is wrong. I don't know, because I'm a relatively new member, from 2019. So I just wonder if some of those are now going to be impossible to actually put in place. We do need, because we still have residents come forward and ask us, are you ever going to actually look at that? So my thought was, should there be a process, and are you going through a process now where you're taking off some of those and we're letting residents know that they'll never be enforceable? Because otherwise I think the list just carries on and we're not telling residents what the situation is. So any guidance you can give me on that would just be good. Thank you.
Chairman, you didn't allow Mr Holmes to answer my questions before you moved on.
I'm sorry.
Mr Holmes, the question was asked, I think. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I believe that checklist did exist, but I think as Mr Councillor has just said that basically it's not a very good checklist. So I think something was introduced, but I think it needs to be revisited, as we said. So what we have is probably not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
Chairman, but I wanted to clarify to make residents know that we do have policies and procedures, because it sounded like we didn't. So it's really important. And I'll tell you why. A resident messaged me and said, are you saying in that meeting this council doesn't have in policies and procedures to do with enforcement? So I think we really need to be cautious about what we're alleging or what we're saying that this council doesn't have. Thank you, Chairman.
I'd agree, and I believe we haven't clarified that point. I think we were talking about sort of the operational working detail of checklists and how we go about prioritising cases, which I think we're saying we could do better, and I think we will do better. So, but that doesn't mean we don't have policies and procedures to follow.
Councillor May, sorry. I've been trying to sort this computer out because the mouse
thank you, Mr.
disappeared.
Chairman. Just on that point about policy, I did actually circulate that to all ONS members before the meeting. It was quite close to the meeting. To me, it looks like we've come up with a number of different areas that we'd like looked at. The first one that Anne highlighted was prioritisation of cases. Second, baseline study of some sort and the pathways of any enforcements. Protocols for members and how we can or cannot be involved with enforcement. And I think health and safety is a very, very important part of that. And you're absolutely right, Anne, some of the individuals are not very pleasant. After hours working, question mark. I think we need to look at that. Closing of cases as a specific. And finally, on my list, I have compliance officers or officer, it's specifically in relation to our new developments and making sure that our new developments comply with what we all sit around and decide, but also on other new builds and extensions going forward. It's not an exhaustive list, obviously, but I think it's a start list. And I propose that that is the recommendation that we put, that the working group or the enforcement working group, whichever is going to look at this, actually deals with. Do I have anybody to second that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Got that?
Yes.
Right, okay. Right, are we finished with that item now?
Could we all vote, please?
Yeah. All in favour?
Yes. Thank you.
So all those points, Chairman, will go back to the working group for further review and report.
Yes, sorry. Can I use your papers because this has gone on strike? Sorry, members. Computer's gone on strike. We're on item 10 now?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Item 10. Oh, sorry, Scarlett, I missed me.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we move on, I would like to ask why the item
where's
that
that
is item 10 has been moved from the agenda, the open agenda, to a P&C item. Could I have some clarity on that one, please?
I need to refer to Cheryl.
Cheryl, can you clear this up? Because apparently the agenda went off the internet, then came back on Monday.
On advice of the monitoring officer, the particular item identifies a member of staff and a member, and so it's been marked as private and confidential.
Where's that gone? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to know the reason. Thank you.
So,
Councillor Beale.
Chair, have we missed item 9?
yeah, you've got
Item 9.
Notice of motion referral conduct issue.
Yeah, that's
My computer's gone on strike, so I'm looking through papers at the moment.
Chairman, if I can help you, you're under the revised agenda, you're at agenda item 8 now, which is any other items of business that the chairman of the committee decides are urgent. And I think, Chairman, you just wanted to note...
Oh, that there's
the committee to note that the Performance Governance and Audit Committee has decided to refer an issue to this committee. Yeah. That is the safeguarding of children and vulnerable adults for review to ensure that the council is supporting this area of work appropriately, together with the officers undertaking the actual work. So this reference from PGO will come formally on the agenda to the next meeting of the committee, but in accordance with usual practice, there's no reason why a start can't be made on information gathering around that topic via the working group, Chairman.
You've lost it as well. Yeah. Right, okay, now we come to exclusion of... exclusion of... we have to resolve that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 2, part 1 of the schedule 12A to the Act, and this satisfies the public interest test.
I'll second that.
Okay. Not been yet. Is this agreed? Agreed. Agreed. Okay.
So, Chairman, can you